Imagine waking up one morning to a shocking announcement from Microsoft. The company that built the world's most dominant desktop operating system reveals that it has created its own Linux distribution. Not just a side project or developer tool, but a full operating system designed to replace traditional Windows as we know it. The tech world would immediately stop and pay attention. At first, this sounds impossible because Microsoft and Linux have spent decades as rivals. Windows represented closed-source software, commercial ecosystems, and centralized control. Linux represented openness, freedom, transparency, and community collaboration. For years, these two platforms symbolized opposite philosophies in computing. But over time, Microsoft's relationship with open source has changed dramatically. The company now contributes to Linux kernel development, owns GitHub, and supports Linux deeply through Azure Cloud Services. It even built the Windows Subsystem for Linux, making Linux tools a native part of Windows itself. These changes suggest something interesting. Microsoft is no longer fighting against open source in the way it once did. Instead, it has slowly embraced Linux where it makes business sense. This raises an important question about the future of computing and Microsoft's long-term strategy. What if Microsoft decided to go all in? What if it built a Linux-based operating system designed to become the future of desktop computing? This would not simply be another Linux distribution among hundreds of others. It would represent one of the biggest shifts in software history. The idea actually makes more sense than most people realize. Windows today is incredibly complex because it carries decades of legacy code. Much of its architecture was built for older generations of hardware and software compatibility requirements that still need to be maintained. That legacy creates problems for Microsoft. It slows down innovation, makes updates riskier, and increases maintenance complexity. Every new feature must interact with old systems that were never designed for modern computing demands. This creates technical debt that grows larger with every Windows release. Linux offers something different. Its modular design, efficient kernel, and open architecture make it easier to adapt for modern hardware and software needs. It powers everything from servers to smartphones to supercomputers. In many ways, Linux is already the backbone of modern computing. If Microsoft wanted to completely rebuild the desktop experience from the ground up, Linux would be a logical foundation. Ite wu halau. Microsoft to focus on creating an exceptional user experience instead of maintaining decades of legacy infrastructure. This could dramatically accelerate innovation. Imagine Microsoft launching something called Windows Open. It would look familiar enough for existing users to feel comfortable, but underneath it would run on the Linux kernel. The desktop interface would combine the best parts of Windows with the flexibility and efficiency of Linux. The Start menu could remain, but become fully customizable without hidden system tweaks. Users could adjust layouts, workflows, and behaviors however they want. Microsoft could finally remove many of the restrictions that frustrate advanced users while still keeping things simple for beginners. Performance would likely improve dramatically. Linux-based systems are generally more efficient with system resources than traditional Windows installations. Faster boot times, smoother multitasking, lower memory usage, and better battery life could all become standard. This would be especially important for laptops. Many Windows machines struggle with background processes, unnecessary system services, and resource-heavy updates. A Microsoft Linux system could deliver significantly better efficiency while still maintaining the polished user experience people expect. Then there's the issue of updates, one of Windows' biggest frustrations. Users have dealt with forced restarts, unexpected installation delays, and occasional update failures for years. These issues have damaged trust and often interrupt workflows at inconvenient times. A Linux-based Microsoft operating system could solve this. Updates could install quietly in the background with optional activation timing. System snapshots could allow instant rollback if something goes wrong. This would create a smoother and far less disruptive experience. Security would also improve significantly. Linux's architecture is widely respected for its stability and strong security model. Combined with Microsoft's enterprise security expertise, the result could be one of the most secure consumer operating systems ever built. Transparency would become another major advantage. Since the core system would be open source, researchers and developers could inspect the code directly. Security vulnerabilities could be identified faster. Privacy concerns could be independently audited, and trust could improve dramatically. This matters more than ever in today's digital world. Many users are increasingly concerned about data collection, telemetry, and hidden system processes. An open-source Microsoft operating system could directly address these concerns by making its code visible and verifiable. Of course, software compatibility would be the biggest challenge. Millions of users rely on Windows-specific applications for work, creativity, gaming, and education. If Microsoft launched Linux without solving compatibility, adoption would be extremely limited. But Microsoft has unique advantages here. It understands Windows software architecture better than anyone else because it built it. This means it could create a compatibility layer far superior to existing solutions like Wine or Proton. Imagine being able to install traditional Windows applications directly on Microsoft Linux with zero extra configuration. Legacy programs would simply run as expected. Adobe tools, engineering software, productivity apps, and niche enterprise programs would all continue working. This would remove Linux's biggest adoption barrier overnight. Users would no longer have to choose between open source benefits and software compatibility. They could have both, making migration far less intimidating for mainstream audiences. Gaming would become even more exciting. Linux gaming has improved rapidly thanks to Valve's Proton compatibility technology. Thousands of Windows games already run well on Linux, proving that the technical barriers are not insurmountable. Now imagine Microsoft officially bringing DirectX support to Linux. This would eliminate compatibility, translation layers, and allow games to run natively. Performance could improve, latency could decrease, and developers could target Linux directly without extra complexity. Xbox integration would become a major selling point. Users could access Game Pass natively, synchronize game saves across devices, and integrate desktop gaming with Xbox consoles seamlessly. Microsoft Linux could instantly become one of the best gaming platforms available. This would reshape the PC gaming landscape. Developers would have stronger incentives to optimize for Linux. Hardware manufacturers would improve Linux driver support. Competing platforms would be forced to innovate faster in response. Developers would likely embrace Microsoft Linux enthusiastically. Linux is already preferred by many programmers because of its command-line tools, package management systems, and native compatibility with server environments. It offers flexibility that traditional Windows often lacks. At the same time, developers rely heavily on Microsoft tools like Visual Studio Code, GitHub, and Azure services. Combining these with Linux's strengths would create an incredibly powerful development platform. Imagine writing code in a polished Microsoft environment while having native Linux containers, package managers, shell tools, and deployment work. This would eliminate many of the compromises developers currently make when choosing between Windows and Linux. Educational institutions would likely adopt such a platform quickly. Students learning programming would gain access to professional Linux workflows without sacrificing usability. This could significantly expand Linux literacy among future generations of software engineers. Enterprise adoption could also accelerate rapidly. Businesses already trust Microsoft for operating systems, productivity tools, cloud infrastructure, and device management. A Microsoft-supported Linux desktop could fit naturally into existing corporate ecosystems. Integration with Microsoft 365, Azure Active Directory, and enterprise security frameworks would make deployment straightforward. Organizations would gain Linux efficiency while keeping the management tools they already depend on. This would be especially attractive for companies seeking lower maintenance costs and stronger security. Linux-based systems often require fewer resources and can be easier to manage at scale when properly integrated into enterprise work. However, the Linux community would react with caution. Open source developers have long memories, and Microsoft's historical hostility toward Linux would not be forgotten overnight. Many would view the move with skepticism. There would be concerns about Microsoft attempting to dominate Linux development or introducing proprietary extensions that fragment the ecosystem. These fears would not be unreasonable given past examples from the broader technology industry. For Microsoft to succeed, it would need genuine transparency. Development would need to happen openly. Community contributions would need to be welcomed. Governance would need to reflect collaboration rather than corporate control. If Microsoft handled this correctly, it could earn significant trust over time. If handled poorly, it would face intense resistance from open source advocates and likely fail to gain meaningful traction within the Linux ecosystem. Branding would also be critical. Microsoft would need to carefully balance familiarity with innovation. Keeping the Windows name would reassure mainstream users, but it could also carry negative associations related to telemetry and system bloat. A name like Windows Open could work well because it signals continuity while emphasizing transformation. It tells users this is still the platform they know, but redesigned around openness and modern computing principles. Marketing would need to focus on practical benefits rather than technical details. Most users do not care about kernels or source code. They care about speed, reliability, compatibility, battery life, and ease of use. If Microsoft could show that Linux-based Windows is faster, more secure, less intrusive, and more stable, users would pay attention. The underlying architecture would matter far less than the improved experience. Hardware manufacturers would quickly adapt. New laptops could ship optimized specifically for Microsoft Linux. Better battery performance, cleaner drivers, and reduced system overhead could become major selling points. This could extend hardware lifespan as well. Older devices often struggle with newer Windows versions due to increasing system demands. A lightweight Linux-based system could keep aging hardware useful for years longer. That would have major environmental benefits by reducing electronic waste. It would also appeal to budget-conscious users who want better performance without buying new hardware every few years. Artificial intelligence could become another major advantage. Microsoft has invested heavily in AI through Copilot and Azure. Linux's flexibility makes it ideal for optimizing local AI workloads. A Microsoft Linux platform could integrate AI deeply at the system level. Local assistants, automation tools, offline language models, and intelligent workflows could all run more efficiently without constant cloud dependency. This would align perfectly with growing demand for privacy-focused local AI processing. Users increasingly want powerful AI features without sending sensitive data to remote servers. Transitioning from traditional Windows would not happen overnight. Microsoft would likely take a gradual approach, introducing Linux-based components incrementally before fully shifting the platform. This could begin with deeper subsystem integration, then evolve into hybrid architectures, and eventually become a complete Linux foundation hidden beneath familiar Windows interfaces. Many users might not even notice the transition initially. They would simply experience better performance, smoother updates, and improved reliability while the underlying system architecture evolves quietly in the background. This kind of gradual migration has worked before in technology history. Apple successfully transitioned processor architectures while maintaining user continuity. Microsoft could follow a similar path if execution is handled carefully. The broader Linux ecosystem would likely benefit. Mainstream adoption driven by Microsoft would normalize Linux desktop use and encourage hardware vendors, software developers, and service providers to strengthen Linux support. As more users become comfortable with Linux concepts, many would eventually explore other distributions. This could create growth across the entire open source desktop landscape rather than limiting benefits to Microsoft alone. Ultimately, this thought experiment is about more than one company changing operating systems. It reflects deeper shifts happening across the technology industry. Open source is no longer a niche movement. It has become foundational to cloud computing, artificial intelligence, web infrastructure, and software development. The line between proprietary and open source ecosystems continues to blur with each passing year. If Microsoft built Linux, it would symbolize the collapse of one of computing's oldest divisions. It would prove that openness and commercial polish can coexist successfully on a massive scale. The future of desktop computing may depend on this kind of hybrid thinking. Users want flexibility without complexity, transparency without inconvenience, and performance without sacrificing familiarity. A Microsoft Linux platform could potentially deliver all of this. It could combine Linux's technical strengths with Microsoft's usability, expertise, and enterprise scale support. Would it be easy? Absolutely not. The technical, cultural, and strategic challenges would be enormous, but the potential rewards could reshape personal computing for decades to come. Maybe the future of Windows is not another traditional Windows release. Maybe the next great leap forward is something entirely different hiding beneath a familiar interface. And if that future arrives, it might show that the biggest revolutions in technology happen when former rivals stop competing and start building something better together.